Welcome to our noon edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Though Thursday marked the day that medical professors who have submitted their resignations last month were set to walk out, no immediate actions have been reported yet. Meanwhile, the Presidential Special Committee on Medical Reform held its first meeting proposing to reduce regional medical disparities and revise medical laws. The United States saw the slowest economic growth since 2022 in the first quarter of this year at 1.6%, hinting that high interest rates are taking a toll on both consumers' borrowing and spending. Because of this slowdown, the Federal Reserve is widely expected to cut interest rates soon. South Korea and its key allies, the U.S. and Japan, have pledged to strengthen cooperation in export controls. The three countries reiterated their commitments in last year's Camp David summit and agreed to better share information and protect technology and information leaks through their trade practices. While the first resignation letter submitted by medical professors last month took effect on Thursday, there have been no reports of professors leaving their posts yet. An emergency committee of medical professors will meet online Friday afternoon to discuss whether to suspend outpatient services once a week as they struggle with fatigue due to extra workload. Iuni tells us more.
An emergency committee of medical professors will convene on Friday afternoon to discuss the implementation of a weekly day off. Earlier this week, medical professors announced they had reached their mental and physical limitations as they provide cover for absent junior doctors, and they will halt medical services for one day next week. Friday's 9th online meeting will decide whether to maintain the weekly day off going forward. Tensions are also high amid the potential for mass resignations by the medical professors. It has been a month since they began submitting their resignations, which began to take effect as of Thursday. The Medical Professors Emergency Committee said that even though the government has not accepted the resignations, Thursday marked the day when the first resignation submitted would take effect under civil law. As yet, no related action by doctors has been reported so far. The Medical School of Seoul National University, one of the so-called Big Five general teaching hospitals in the country, said departures will be carried out based on individual choice. But four leaders of its school's emergency council have confirmed they will be leaving the hospital on May 1st. The Emergency Council at the Med School of Ulsan University also announced that its medical professors' resignations will begin on Thursday, and those who are unable to resign immediately will halt medical services for one day per week from May 3rd. However, emergency and critical care services are not expected to be affected. Meanwhile, the Presidential Special Committee on Medical Reform held its first meeting on Thursday morning. The government-proposed social consultation meeting will focus on reducing regional medical disparities, revising medical laws, supporting costs at hospitals, and increasing medical personnel. However, the Korean Medical Association, the largest doctors group, and the Korean Intern Resident Association have declared that they won't participate. The government had encouraged these medical groups to participate, but they refused to back down from their demand that the government completely withdraw its medical school expansion plan.
The Special Committee on Medical Reform will help make South Korea's healthcare system better by bringing people together to talk about changes. The government once again asked the KMA and the KIRA to participate.
He said discussions on the current medical dispute regarding the government's plan to expand the medical school enrollment quota by 2,000 from next year would be excluded. Lee In-hee, Arirang News.
The U.S. economy grew just 1.6% in the first 3 months of this year, in a sign that high interest rates may be taking a toll on both borrowing and spending. Shin Se-byuk has the details.
The U.S. Department of Commerce released a report on Thursday that showed that the world's biggest economy grew at an annualized rate of 1.6% for the first quarter of this year. This marks the lowest rate since a contraction of 0.6% in quarter 2 of 2022. This figure is significantly lower than the previous quarter's growth of 3.4%. It also falls well below the 2.4% increase anticipated by market experts polled by the Wall Street Journal. The Commerce Department attributed the slowdown to reduced personal spending, fewer exports, and decreased government expenditure at both the local and federal levels. Personal consumption, the largest driver of the U.S. economy, increased by only 2.5% in the January to March period, down 3.3% on quarter. There was an uptick in spending on services such as healthcare, finance, and insurance, but there was a notable decline in the consumption of goods, including cars, gasoline, and other energy products. Challenges remain in the U.S. as inflation remains persistently high amid weakening economic growth. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, a key inflation variable for the Federal Reserve, rose at a 3.4% annualized pace for the quarter. It is the highest increase in the past year and a substantial jump from the 1.8% seen in the prior quarter. The core PCE prices, which exclude food and energy, jumped 3.7%. This figure, a key indicator for the U.S. Central Bank when setting interest rates, far exceeds the Fed's target of 2%, dampening hopes that the Federal Reserve would begin cutting interest rates in the near term. Amid fears of stagflation, a scenario of stagnant economic growth paired with high inflation, Wall Street stocks closed lower on Thursday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slid by 0.98%. The S&P 500 lost 0.46%. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq Composite fell 0.64%. 신세벽, Arirang News.
South Korea's better-than-expected economic growth in the first quarter could put a pause on the opposition party's proposal for a supplementary budget. Though the opposition party says the budget is needed due to an economic crisis, the recent rosy economic findings could make that argument lose ground. Park Won-woo with the details.
South Korea's opposition Democratic Party's proposal for a supplementary budget of 13 trillion won, or around $9.4 billion to stabilize people's livelihoods, could lose ground as the economy has recently seen higher than expected growth. The Bank of Korea's data for the gross domestic product in the first quarter released on Thursday showed an on-quarter surprise rise of 1.3% due to a recovery in exports, construction investment, and private consumption. The growth figure was higher than the early expectations of 0.6 to 0.7% for economic growth in the first quarter. According to Article 89 of the National Finance Act, the government can only make extra budgets in exceptional cases, such as a war, major natural disasters, or an economic recession. But as the opposition party is asserting economic crisis as the reason for a supplementary budget, the strong economic data for Q1 could possibly put the brakes on their recent proposal, as it does not meet those legal requirements. Still, as those findings are shown to be partially due to the base effect, and as both the ruling People Power Party and opposition Democratic Party are concerned about the economic sentiment, it has been reported that the opposition party could still push for the extra budget. But other factors could prevent the proposal from moving forward. These include the impact of the record-high shortfall in tax revenue from last year and the backlash toward frequent supplementary budgets, especially as the government debt exceeded 50% of GDP last year. The government has made extra budgets 4 times in 2020 and 2 times each in 2021 and 2022 during the COVID-19 pandemic. Park Won-woo, Arirang News.
The economic impact of heightened geopolitical tensions in the Middle East is being felt all around the world. In South Korea, the effects are being seen especially in the financial markets and oil prices. Our economics correspondent Moon Hae-ryun with the details.
As Iran and Israel traded direct attacks against each other's territory for the first time, the South Korean won took a tumble against the US dollar. Recent data has shown that the exchange rate between the two currencies has risen by over 7% this year, exceeding the rise seen during the financial crisis of 2008. Last week, international oil prices shot up. The global benchmark Brent crude oil surpassed $90 per barrel. But oil prices have been fluctuating this week following Israel's limited retaliatory strikes, causing traders to dismiss the possibility of a sustained war between the two sides. South Korea's benchmark Kospi index also saw a sharp decline. Last Friday, it dipped below the 2,560 mark for the first time since February. This comes as foreign investors seek safe haven assets, but one expert says another big factor has been hawkish remarks from Federal Reserve officials.
For high-tech industries, the interest rate is very important for their investment plans. So with longer period of high interest rates, that they may scale back on their investment plans, and that's showing up in the stock prices of high-tech industries.
The country's economy is showing some signs of recovery, with the $1 exchange rate this week less unstable compared to immediately following the attacks last week. The government has also extended the fuel tax cut by 2 months to June as oil prices affect headline inflation. According to the Federation of Korean Industries, should active conflict break out and crude oil prices rise to over 3 digits per barrel, the rising consumer prices could rocket up by more than 4%. Fuel tax cuts could have a limited effect given that the core inflation rate excluding food and energy prices has been stable at around 2.5% this year.
So this figure is the lowest level since 2022, implying that the price level, excluding the energy products, has stabilized a lot during the last 2 years. So given that the price level has become already stabilized a lot compared to before, we can expect that the effect of the tax cut will be somewhat limited.
A ministerial economic meeting on Thursday discussed how supply chains as a whole could be affected. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok described the supply chain as fragile as thin ice and highlighted the importance of a strong supply chain that many of the country's high-tech sectors are reliant on. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Nearly 700,000 South Koreans are receiving a national pension of over 1 million Korean won per month. According to figures released by the National Pension Service on Friday, as of December 2023, over 687,000 recipients were receiving this amount. The vast majority, around 680,000, are getting old age pensions. About 4,500 receive survivor benefits, and another 2,000 get disability pensions. Of the old age pension recipients, over 70% have been contributing to the National Pension Scheme for over 20 years. About 18,000 people receive monthly pensions of at least 2 million won. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un guided a rocket test on Thursday involving a new 240mm shell for a multiple launch rocket system. According to the state-run Rodong-sinmun newspaper on Friday, the new technology developed by the regime's newly established National Defense Industry Enterprise will bring about a strategic shift to strengthen artillery capabilities. The 240mm multiple rocket launcher is reportedly capable of striking South Korea's capital region. At the site, Kim Jong-un demanded the regime's new defense industry office to successfully fulfill this year's military production plan. The enterprise was established under the Second Economic Commission, North Korea's main organization in charge of managing all weapons production and foreign sales. Defense officials of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have condemned Pyongyang's November launch of a purported reconnaissance satellite, as well as its missile tests and weapons transfers to Moscow. During the 14th Defense Trilateral talks on Wednesday, South Korea's Deputy Defense Minister for Policy, Cho Chang-rae, U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, Eli Ratner, and Japan's Director General for Defense Policy, Koji Kano, in a joint statement slammed North Korea's recent diversification of nuclear delivery system, tests, and launches of multiple ballistic missiles. They also condemned what the North claims is a military reconnaissance satellite using ballistic missile technology and arms shipments with Russia, calling them clear violations of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. The talks came as North Korea plans to launch multiple spy satellites this year, despite international criticism. The first high-level summit on ways to prevent the abuse of sensitive technologies was held in Washington, where South Korea, the U.S., and Japan all agreed to bolster cooperation in strengthening export controls. Our trade correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
High-level officials from South Korea, the United States, and Japan have agreed to strengthen cooperation in tightening export controls and blocking leaks of sensitive technology. The agreement was reached between the three countries during the Disruptive Technology Protection Network Summit held on Thursday local time in Washington, according to South Korea's Trade Ministry and Justice Ministry. The Justice Ministry and its counterparts in Tokyo and Washington will work together to enforce laws regarding technology leakages, while the Trade Ministry agreed to strengthen export controls. The governments of each country are planning to also more actively share information in areas of technology protection and export controls. The meeting comes after the leaders of the three nations met at Camp David last August, where they agreed to launch the Disruptive Technology Protection Network in order to work more closely to prevent innovative technologies from being used to endanger national security. And Thursday's meeting marked the first high-level trilateral summit of the Disruptive Technology Protection Network. While the Camp David summit did not mention who was abusing these innovative technologies, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco called out China, Russia, and Iran in her opening remarks during Thursday's meeting, where she said, "From China backing cyber hackers who target international businesses and political leaders, to Russia unleashing the most significant land invasion in Europe since the Second World War, to Iran plotting to assassinate dissidents around the world." She added that their actions are far-reaching as these threats are playing out on phones and online apps. Earlier this week, in a move to address what the U.S. government sees as a national security threat, President Biden signed a bipartisan legislation to ban Chinese-owned TikTok unless it is sold. The U.S. senior official also said that artificial intelligence is currently at the top of the U.S. government's enforcement priority list for disruptive technologies. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to visit China from next month for what would be his first overseas trip since he extended his presidential term for another 6 years. Putin made the announcement at a meeting of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs in Moscow on Thursday local time, but did not give any other details, including when the trip would take place. Last month, the 71-year-old Russian leader secured his 5th term in office through an election with no real opposition. Putin, who last visited China in October of 2023, will likely seek ways to bolster ties with Beijing. The Israeli military said Wednesday that its main infantry brigade has been mobilized for missions in Gaza, signaling a possible attack in Rafah soon. Despite the looming offensive, Hamas says Israel won't be able to achieve their goal of eliminating the Palestinian militant group. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The Israeli military has begun moving its main infantry brigade south, signaling the imminent start to offensives in Rafah. It also announced on Wednesday that 2 of its reservist brigades had been mobilized for missions in Gaza. According to the Times of Israel, citing military sources, the 2 reservist brigades, the 679th Armored Brigade and the 2nd Infantry Brigade, which have been operating on the northern border, will be moved to the central region of Gaza, freeing up the Nahal Brigade to join the 162nd Division in preparing for future operations, including the planned offensives in Rafah. Operations in Rafah come despite international warnings that an attack in the region will lead to many civilian deaths, worsening the already dire humanitarian crisis. Israeli officials also said that Hamas had 6 remaining battalions in the enclave, including 4 in Rafah. Meanwhile, a senior Hamas official said that the Israeli military will not achieve its goal of eliminating them, adding that it will also not see their hostages released. He emphasized that Israel had been in Gaza for nearly 7 months, invading every inch of it, but have not yet achieved any of its main goals. He further added that he has discussed the seriousness of a Rafah invasion with mediators in Qatar, and that Israel is heading towards committing a further massacre. The senior official warned that the planned offensives in southern Gaza will threaten the negotiation talks, adding that Israel has shown that it has no intention of reaching an agreement. The U.S., Qatar, and Egypt have been mediating negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage release, but have been unable to resolve the deadlock. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In Qatar on Thursday, South Korea's under-23 football team lost to Indonesia on penalties and were eliminated from the Olympic qualifiers. The match at the Abdullah bin Khalifa Stadium in Doha was the quarterfinal of the Asian Football Confederation U23 Asian Cup, which doubles as the qualifying tournament for the Paris Olympics. Headed by coach Hwang Sun-hong, the South Korean team drew the game with a score of 2-2 at the end of 120 minutes of game time, but lost 10-11 in the resulting penalty shootout. Before this defeat, South Korea had played at every Olympic men's football tournament since the Seoul 1988 Olympics.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. We begin today in the U.S., where disgraced Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein's 2020 rape conviction in New York was overturned on Thursday. The New York Court of Appeals said that the prosecution in 2020 made the mistake of calling for witnesses to testify against Weinstein when their accusations were not part of the charges against him. The The court reached a 4-3 ruling on Thursday, saying that the remedy for these errors is a new trial. 72-year-old Weinstein had received a 23-year sentence in the original trial. Although that rape conviction has been overturned, Weinstein will remain in prison to serve a separate 16-year prison sentence after being convicted by a Californian court last year of the rape of an actress. Accusations against Weinstein in 2017 sparked the Me Too movement, exposing sexual abuse in Hollywood and beyond. China's Shenzhou 18 spaceship carrying 3 crew members reportedly docked with the Tiangong space station early this morning. According to Chinese state media Xinhua, the China Manned Space Agency announced at 3:32 a.m. local time on Friday that the spaceship docked with the space station. The 3 crew members had taken off in the Shenzhou 18 from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center just before 9 p.m. local time on Thursday. They are led by fighter pilot and astronaut Ye Guangfu, who was previously a crew member of the Shenzhou 13. During their 6-month space mission, the crew will do over 90 experiments, up to 3 extravehicular activities, and carry out 6 cargo outbound deliveries via the station's cargo airlock module. In Nigeria, a manhunt is underway after at least 118 inmates escaped from a prison near the country's capital, Abuja. The Nigerian Interior Minister said that 10 of the 118 inmates who escaped from Sledger prison on Wednesday night had since been captured. He also criticized the conditions of the prison, saying that it was overcrowded, housing almost 500 inmates, double the prison's 250-person capacity. According to the prison spokesperson, a heavy downpour on Wednesday night destroyed parts of the perimeter wall and surrounding buildings of the prison, allowing inmates to escape. Spanish police, along with Europol on Wednesday, busted a counterfeit currency workshop making 2 euro coins near the city of Toledo. The Spanish National Police said they arrested 10 Chinese people since the beginning of the investigation and while dismantling the coin manufacturing workshop. They also seized almost 400,000 2 euro coins. The dismantled coin workshop is reportedly the largest such operation in Europe. The criminal group is suspected of having already introduced nearly 100,000 fake coins into the Spanish market. The police said that the counterfeit coins can be recognized by magnetism testing. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. We're expecting a summer preview today that should continue into Sunday. But morning temperatures will remain in the low teens, so beware of wide temperature swings and do dress accordingly if you plan a weekend getaway. However, the dust levels could go up in the capital area and east of Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-Pukto provinces during the day today. So please check the dust levels before heading out and have a face mask handy. But the rest of the country will have normal to good air quality all day today. Plenty of sunshine is in the forecast for most places except on Jeju Island, where spotty rain is in the forecast with a high of 20 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Meanwhile, Gwangju gets up to 25 degrees. Gyeongju and Chuncheon will be topping out at 27 degrees Celsius. It's going to feel more like the end of May today. Then rain is in the forecast for next Monday, cooling down the weekend's summer-like temperatures. Then the start of May looks to be warm and sunny nationwide. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you at this hour. We'll bring you more updates at the same time next week.